Welcome to Literacy Talks, the podcast for literacy leaders and champions everywhere, brought to you by Reading Horizons. Literacy Talks is the place to discover new ideas, trends, insights, and practical strategies for helping all learners reach reading proficiency. Our hosts are Stacy Hurst, a professor at Southern Utah University and Chief Academic Advisor for Reading Horizons; Donnell Pons, a recognized expert and advocate in literacy, dyslexia, and special education; and Lindsay Kemeny, an elementary classroom teacher, author, and speaker. Now, let's talk literacy.
Welcome to this episode of Literacy Talks. I'm so excited today because Lindsay and Donnell and I have been focusing our last few episodes on change makers. And if you haven't noticed, we're trying to cover change makers at every level. And I think this is a level that is sometimes left out and maybe unrightfully so. So our guest today is none other than Justin Browning, and he is going to talk to us. We're going to visit with him about how implementation matters when we're trying to make a difference for students, and a little bit about what he's done to do that. Just some background information. If you go to conferences, you know Justin. Like, he is there, and he's the guy to know. And actually, that's how we met, Justin, right? Big Sky.
Yeah, I think we were at a table together, maybe accidentally on purpose.
Accidentally on purpose multiple times. It was like, these are my people. So anyway, it's so fun to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. Lindsay, Donnell, we all go way back with Justin, right?
We love Justin. We're so glad you're here.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll just start out with background questions for the very few people who may not know who you are. Just tell us about your background. How did you get here? What roles have you had? What shaped how you think about literacy, schools, leadership, that kind of thing?
Good question. How did I get here? I'm still asking myself that every day. I'm unsure. However, at my core, I'm an educator. I'm a teacher. I was in the classroom for about 9 years. Many of my years in the classroom were spent in second grade. I have a soft spot for second grade. And really from there, I was on the path to leadership. And so actually, I wasn't even really going to finish college. Let me go ahead and start there. Long ago, I worked in nonprofit work, and I was doing some work that actually was paying more than teaching. And I thought, I don't need a degree. And then actually I was like, okay, I do need a degree, because deep down, so I'm going way back, deep down, I knew that teaching was somewhere in my future. It was a mission trip that I was on with the church group a long time ago, and we were in Far Rockaway, New York. We worked with a school there over the summer, and I actually have a picture right over here in my office of me as should I grab it? Hold on.
Yes, we'd love to see this.
As a junior high kid. This is really bad.
Oh.
Okay, so here it is. Yep. I don't know if you can see it.
Look at Justin.
Me as a junior high kid in New York, and we were working with this really impoverished school there that was serving really a neighborhood that needed support, right? And so it just opened my eyes to, hey, I think this is a place where I feel at home, where I feel connected. And actually I have my master's degree now, and I'm considering a doctorate degree. So education's not completely out of the picture, but I went back and I completed my education degree, actually, luckily, at the University of Mississippi, which is, of course, closely connected with the Barksdale Reading Institute. So in my undergrad years, I had exposure to the work that they were doing as well, which, if we want to think about, like, how did I get to where I am now? There were little seeds that were sown along the way that I didn't even know why. But I can recall being at a school in the poorest parts of Mississippi as well, and walking into a school one day and thinking, does this school have a janitor? Like, it was the dirtiest school I'd ever been in.
Wow.
And the crazy thing is that you would think this place is just ridden with poverty. These kids probably aren't learning or doing anything. And it was the complete opposite. The kids were reading like their hair was on fire. The teachers were teaching with intention. And it was a magical moment for me as an educator, as someone who had that seed from long ago in New York in me, right? Now seeing this in Mississippi. And really, I think that's how I got to where I am today, is that I just believe that everybody deserves the gift of literacy, right? Because really literacy is a language of opportunity. And I think that's why I am where I am. I see how it opens doors and how illiteracy closes doors and how it limits the voice and the choice that people have. If you're illiterate, people are making choices for you. Someone else has a voice at the table. And so that's what my passion is really to make sure that every student gets an education where they live a life of voice and choice. And so, like I said, I was a teacher, and I believe that as I was teaching, I was a model classroom teacher for the Rollins Center for Language and Literacy, which is also a seed that was sown that becomes a part of my story. And I was doing that work. I was on the path to administration. So I got my master's degree in administration, and I ended up being at this kind of crossroads of, after being an instructional coach for a little while. So I was an instructional coach at a turnaround school. But after being an instructional coach at a turnaround school, I was at this crossroads of like, okay, what do I do now? Is this where I am going the path of administration? Do I want to pursue something else? And then through my relationship with the Rollins Center for Language and Literacy as a model teacher, teaching second grade, I was able to work with their team over the summers, really facilitating summer learning as a coach with them and a supporter of their work. And I got a tap on the shoulder from Dr. Ryan Lee James, who is the director of the Rollins Center and also the chief academic officer at the Atlanta Speech School. And she said, hey, I really would like for you to consider this. And so I interviewed for a job at the Rollins Center for Language and Literacy here in Atlanta and became a field implementation coordinator, which is a really big word for we're going to give you a computer and a dream, and we're going to figure out how to make this work, right? And so it was all about really transforming literacy instruction in a district. And so I was able to work with Marietta City Schools and work with them to transform from really a balanced literacy school district into a district that was implementing structured literacy and the science of reading. And since then, their results have been phenomenal. They were able to really outperform the state by like 5 times. And now the data keeps showing bigger and bigger numbers along the way. But it's really less about test scores to me and more about I was able to be a part of transforming teachers' lives. Teachers showed up and they were feeling successful again. I think that I was able, through the work and partnership, I would never say this is something that I did on my own because I don't believe that to be true at all. I think it was through really powerful partnership and through a lot of hard work that we were able to transform the lives of students, because students who may have never had the chance to learn to read were now offered that because teachers had knowledge that then they were moving into practice. And the end result's been amazing. They're still on their journey. Do we have 95% of our kids at the district reading on grade level right now? The answer is no. But are we getting closer? The answer is yes. And one of the schools that I really worked with closely at the beginning, they were really a high-performing school. About 70% of their kids were reading on grade level when we started. And people said, well, maybe this doesn't work for these kids. I don't know if you know anything about me, but I was like, game on. And thankfully, I was partnered with a principal that high-fived me and was like, game on. And I have to just give her a shout out, Dr. Christina Wagner. Today, she is leading a school that is #1 in the state for third grade. #1 in the state for third grade. That's Westside Elementary in Marietta. And they have, I believe it's 96% of their kids in third grade reading on grade level.
Oh, wow. That's significant.
So, I would say, again, not all me. Thankfully, I was able to be a little agent of change there, but it wasn't all me, right? It was the power of a partnership, the power of moving knowledge into practice, and really being able to see what happens when a school district supports this work, really from the district level. A principal owns the data and leads the work well every day. And that's one thing she does. She leads that work well every day in that building, along with other principals there in Marietta. And so it's just that's kind of been my story. And so where that all led me was I realized that I have a heart for, I think I've always been like an entrepreneur at heart, and I love to start things and build things. And so throughout that process, I was a national letters trainer. I've done some consulting work with 95% Group. And all of this kind of led to me beginning my own business, which is SOAR for More, SOR for More. And really, that's what I do every day. And so I'm lucky to be able to be in about 12 school districts right now, working with their leadership to support their success and to really transform students' lives. Because at the end of the day, test scores are important to me, but that students have a life of voice and choice, that's really what's most important to me.
Yeah. And I have the same conversation with my pre-service teachers about the test they have to pass to get their license. That is a milestone. That is not our goal. Our goal is what's beyond that, right?
Like, it's like a checkpoint, right? It's like, are we doing it? Good, we're doing it.
Yep. But, yeah. It's just an indicator and only one. So, yeah. I love so much about what you said, resonated with what I know you do. And I don't know if you know, if we've talked about this, but did you know I used to live in Marietta? On Whitlock Avenue.
Remember, this was one of our many hallway conversations, I think, at a conference.
Yeah. Whitlock Avenue, Marietta. I love it. And next week, we're actually interviewing Dr. Grant Rivera, who is the superintendent of the Marietta School District.
Clearly, I'm a huge fan of him because it requires district leadership from the very top. And he's been all that and more in this work.
Well, that is what I was going to ask you. The next question is, then you have been in a lot of these spaces that have seen that change. What do you think actually moves the dial? You've mentioned many of them, but if you could just put a fine point on it for literacy in schools and in classrooms, what do you think moves the dial there?
So the thing that I will say is that there are a lot of different levers, right? We can leverage many different systems, but without courageous leadership at the top, these initiatives fall flat. And we need people that are partnered up. We need superintendents that are courageous, that are partnering with their school board and that are partnering with people in the district office and people running our schools, leaders running our schools, but it takes courageous leadership. And I think that so often we are afraid of courage in our school systems. And I think why we're afraid of courage is actually sad, but I think we're so busy protecting faulty systems rather than protecting children who the system is failing, that we're scared if we're courageous, it might undo something that we've previously said or done. And so I think it takes two things, right? It takes a humble leader, someone who can say, yeah, we did that and we're not doing that anymore. But then it also takes a courageous leader, someone who says, hey, when we know better, we do better, right? And I love the John Maxwell quote. I have it on my wall over here. It says, leaders know the way, go the way, and show the way. We're asking teachers to do a lot. And we need, if we're asking them to be courageous, they deserve leaders layers above them that are being courageous and that are paving the way for them to be successful every day. And so I will say that about Grant at every step of the way. He has thought, how can I make the teachers on the ground floor be courageous or be more courageous? Because I've paved the way for them to do so. And so I think that, courage to me, I would say a good dose of humble pie, right? Like a good slice of humble pie serves us all well. And then also just being courageous and not being afraid to disrupt, like courageous yet humble leader. That sounds like a good job description, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for.
Justin, I like what you said about it's okay to have been wrong, to move forward and be right. And that's something a lot of us are afraid to do, is to admit that in the past we may have been wrong, but we need to be able to do that in order to be right moving forward.
Yeah, and that's so hard from anyone that's in leadership. I was walking with a leader the other day, and we've been together now for about a year and a half, and things are getting, like, we're seeing a change in some practices. There are some places where we've really got to up our leadership game. And she and I were walking out together, and she said, I am just scared. And you know what my response to her was? Do it scared. Do it scared. Like, sometimes we have to just do it scared. And it's oftentimes our ego, and I get it. No one likes to feel like I told you one thing, I sold you one thing, right? I told you this was the program that was going to do it. But sometimes we have to make critical changes, and sometimes we have to do it scared and really eat the humble pie in the process, because we don't have the privilege of waiting it out for the sake of our ego. Like, that to me is a scary, scary place to be. If we're just like, okay, we're just going to not do that. We're going to wait because it might impact what people think of me. Do you know who people trust? I'm going to trust a leader that can say, I'm sorry, that can say I've done something wrong, and that can say, but I am here to support this work all the way. Because teachers know if the curriculum's not working. Teachers know if we're holding on to something longer than we should. And I actually think that we can build a lot of trust in our teams when we step forward and we do the scared thing or the scary thing, right? That we're courageous.
Yeah. As you were talking, I don't know if you noticed it, but you said there's some practices that we haven't quite seen change yet. And as in that sentence, what would also make sense is we haven't quite seen the changes in the scores that we want to see yet. But you said practices. So talk to me about what changes on maybe a classroom level that you help teachers to realize and be brave enough to try, right? What changes are you working with teachers on?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I think that one of the things that I'll say is that the first thing when we think about practices is it's really just starting with explicit instruction. And too often we're diving straight into just change the reading practices. Yeah. And so that's been one of the things, right, is really working on what does explicit instruction look like? How do we teach skills and concepts, right? Being really clear across the board, like what are our routines for vocabulary instruction? What does it look like to increase opportunities to respond in classrooms? Because what I say often is that the difference between a poor reader and a proficient reader is often the amount of practice they have. And how often do we unintentionally, but also regularly limit the amount of practice kids get because of our decisions as an educator? And I think we have to make really, really informed decisions around how we increase opportunities to respond, because that's just more practice for all kids. And so using choral response, increasing how we implement turn-in talks, all kinds of ways to really get students actively involved. One of the things that I think I see in a lot of schools right now is very passive teaching and learning. And so it's passive, the pace is slow. And so really teaching teachers about a perky pace and how when we use strong routines that can be used across the day, right, then we're able to pick up our pace. It's predictable. I'm a huge Anita Archer fan. You're probably picking up on that a little bit already, but I love that she says predictability predicts ability.
Yeah.
That's true, right? Like our kids are going to be able to be more successful when we stick with predictable routines. And so really just implementing routines that are predictable throughout the day. That's just kind of the baseline, right? It's like, what does this look like for good overall universal instruction? And there's so much more that I could go into there, but I think that's just something. And Lindsay, I see your teacher self perking up right now, but I definitely think that too often we're diving straight into, can you teach phonemic awareness, or can you teach phonics well, or can you help build fluency, when really we don't have just strong instruction in place. And so I'm spending a lot of time in schools right now working on just strong instruction. It's really been my experience that teachers want to do the right thing, but it's really hard to do something that you haven't seen.
Right.
And in too many places, in too many schools, instruction is this isolated thing, right? We're not as collaborative as a profession as we want to be. I think we talk about it as a buzzword a lot, but teachers are still teaching and learning and doing in isolation a lot. And so we have to really show them, what does instruction look like when we're moving away from just being a passive instructor or teacher and moving from passive learning to active learning. Oftentimes, Lindsay, I would love to hear your opinion on this, but I think that we have a lot of activity directors in classrooms. Okay, we're going to teach this today, and here's the 6 activities we're going to do with it, right? And instead of being activity driven, what would happen if we moved to like active teaching and learning? And where there's so many at-bats and opportunities to respond and opportunities for corrective feedback. And really, that's what I'm seeing in schools, is that we have to build teaching stamina. So when I think about practices, it's going back to building teaching stamina too. Because we all have lived in the land of 10 to 12 minute mini lessons, and phew, now I can let go and I can bring a little small group over here with me, and they can go over there and work in independent stations. And like the 10 to 12 minutes, we were like, let's pack that 10 to 12 minutes full with a punch, and boom, now we release them to go struggle on their own. And y'all are laughing because I think you recognize like this is a reality in a lot of rooms. But how do we help teachers build? How do we support teachers? Right? I don't think it's their fault. I think it's a faulty system. Right? It's a system they've been taught. It's like this is what it should look like. What are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking that's my current role, right? I'm upstream. I'm the ones who give them the start. So even as you're talking, and we brought up Anita Archer, she said this at a higher ed summit right before the Reading League conference that I've been thinking about it ever since. She said kind of exactly what you said. We should teach pre-service teachers first how to teach and then teach them the content. Well, I don't know about the universities y'all went to, but at mine, it was kind of backwards. You didn't get that methods part of it until the end. You have had the content instruction, maybe a little bit about how to teach, like lesson planning and those kind of things, but not the real routines and practices that you're talking about, Justin. So this is timely because right now my students are starting their semester-long tutoring of first graders. And I am tasked with, this is their second literacy class. So they have a foundational knowledge, but we're teaching them what a structured literacy lesson plan, we call it that, but it's really routines, right, that go into, and it's not just teaching them the why and the how, but the what and the when. And it's a lot, but I think that's where it starts. So none of us that went to school for teaching, I wasn't even taught something as simple as reading doesn't happen naturally, right? So it's systemic. It starts from the pre-service time, for sure.
Right. And I want to stamp the idea. And Lindsay, I know as a teacher, and I still feel very much like I'm a teacher, and I've had to undo so much and teach myself so much that I want to name, like, this is not a teacher problem. This is a systems problem, right? Like the idea and the way that things have been able to evolve over time is really that systems have allowed it, or systems have supported it, or systems have ignored it, right? Like what happens when a system ignores something? And so, Lindsay, I would love to hear kind of your thoughts on like, what do you see and kind of what has your experience been with all of this?
Yeah, well, Justin, you got me all excited talking about that. I love the idea of active teaching, right? And just like you, I'm a huge proponent of Dr. Anita Archer. Like, she's just my hero. And I feel like she has truly changed the way I teach. And it's really bridging what I've learned from her with the science of reading. And that's like what makes the secret sauce. And you were talking about this practice and how, really that's the difference between a proficient reader and one maybe who's struggling is how much practice. And I think about that a lot in my teaching, how much practice students are getting. And then I was coaching another teacher, and since then, I've just seen and heard this a lot of other times. So I think it's really common. And I think it goes back to, Justin, what you're saying, where a lot of teachers, one, haven't been taught this, but also haven't been shown it. So they just haven't seen, like a strong phonics lesson or whatever part of the day it is. But where, this one teacher I was coaching, I would say, well, who is doing the work? Who is doing the work? For example, during the dictation part of her phonics lesson, she was writing every single word. And so the kids were just really copying her. So I'm thinking, who's doing the work, the students or you? And I think, after talking to some teachers, I think this is really common, where you think maybe we're almost over scaffolding in some ways, or we think, well, I'm modeling. Okay, well, model it once, pull it back and see what they can do, and then I had just thinking about making the most of your time. I had teachers asking me, well, then after everyone has spelled the word, do you go up to the front and then write it under the document camera or whatever? And I'm like, well, no, because I've been walking around and I already can see everyone has it correct. So if I already see that everyone has it, I've given feedback to the ones who didn't, and I have some of you know that I choose a student to go write it up while I'm going around to monitor, right? So we can just move on. And that's important because we need more practice opportunities. So anyways, I'm just thinking about that a lot. Who's doing the work and how much practice is everyone getting?
Yeah. And going back to practices, the scaffolding is a huge piece, right? Like the use of gradual release, like all of these things have to be clearly taught. I found myself, and I'm 2 years into my, like being a consultant with my business and really working with schools. And I'm spending the majority of my time for the first year and a half in schools, really helping their leadership develop an understanding of the science of reading, but also helping leadership and teachers just understand good instruction. Because that is really the foundation of all of this working. And I love that you were like, that's the secret sauce. I use that terminology all the time. It's the secret sauce. I think I have several secret sauces that I talk about, but that's one of them, right? It's got to be like the science of reading with the science of learning and instruction, right? It's those things together.
And there's a science to it, but it's also an art. And I think that's really neat and why I love teaching. And it will develop and you will get better. And really, I just love that challenge of really, really keening into what the students need and who needs more and who needs less. And just being really flexible with that. But it's an art.
You're just honing your craft, which is artful. Yeah.
Honing is the better word. I don't know.
Oh, that's good. Well explained.
Teaching literacy shouldn't mean juggling multiple programs. Ascend Mastery by Reading Horizons brings it all together. A core comprehensive pre-K through 5 literacy curriculum that connects word recognition, language comprehension, oral language, and writing, built on decades of proven foundational expertise. Ascend Mastery simplifies instruction and helps every student build lasting literacy gains. Ascend Mastery will be available for district and school implementation beginning with the 2026 school year. Visit readinghorizons.com/ascend to learn more and sign up for updates.
So, Justin, you brought up some interesting things. And just listening to you, Lindsay, talking about here I am coaching a teacher. I'm working with a colleague. Wow. Groundbreaking. Let's just take credit for that. Isn't that awesome, right? To be given those opportunities. So, Justin, you talked a little bit about having the humility. That I could hear some things that you were keying into that made a site prepared to do these things, to do the heavy lifting. So that humility key piece. I'm looking at Lindsay and thinking opportunities for coaching and working with other teachers. Justin, in your experience, what are some of the things that schools can do, sites can do in order to make their place more conducive to change, to make it work?
Yeah, there's a lot, but I think the very first thing is to just have an honest conversation around where we are data-wise. I think the data tells a story. I think that's part of it. But the other thing is to get this kind of all in, all the time, all of us mentality, that there's no more, these are your kids, these are my kids, right? Intervention, those kids that may be struggling, those are yours, right? No, they're all our kids. And we have to be working in a systematic way to support them. So I think like that's one thing is that shift. This is not going to be popular, and I'm going to go ahead and say this, but I think we're over PDing our teachers to the point that we are knowledge bombing them. Mm-hmm. And what I see kind of everywhere is that they've received so much PD, whether it's asynchronous, whether it's a day here, a day there, but they're not actually able to move it into action or practice. Why? Because it's just words and it's just words and it's just words and it's ideas and ideas. And so I think one of the things that I'm working with a lot of schools I'm working with right now is developing PD in such a way that it is bite-sized and actionable and really where they're able to learn something and then do something, right? Like, how do we help them get closer to the end goal by learning a little, doing a little, learning a little, doing a little, versus learn a lot, forget a lot, right? Like, I think that's where we're living, is we learn a lot, we forget a lot, and in the end, we're not getting any closer to the finish line.
Well, and even having time to process that. I remember so many PDs, and, in the spirit of being vulnerable, I probably organize some of these very situations. Same. As a first grade teacher, I remember thinking, this is fantastic. It's February 2nd and I need time to think about this and think about how I'm going to apply it. I have to teach tomorrow. So I don't have time. And then you move on and then you never come back. And without that support or follow up, how can I support you in implementing this change? I love the idea of bite size. That's so important.
And then what does it look like? What does the support look like after the bite-sized training is given? And I'm actually a huge fan recently of this idea of like, what could a 10-minute PD look like with teachers? Friends, here's the one thing I want to show you today. Now go back and practice it. I'll be in your classrooms this week to help you support it, right? Because I think that too often what we do is we overload them with this laundry list of things to do. We don't even connect it to the curriculum that we're using. So I think we have to make really clear connections to how does this fit in our context and with the resources that we're using, right? They need to see that connection, and then they need support with making that happen in their classroom. And so I and really district leadership have been leaning into real-time coaching. And we do it for a few reasons. One, no one, and I could be wrong, I'm humble enough to say I'm wrong, but my experience in schools has been that time is finite for everybody, for teachers, for coaches, for admin, for everybody. And so how do we make sure that we can actually give teachers what they need and support them along the way? And real-time coaching does that. It allows me to see a model in real time. It allows me to try something in my room with support. And it allows me to realize that my administrator isn't just in here to evaluate me, but they actually want to see me and my kids be successful in real time. That's huge. Nothing sucks more than an administrator walking in, or a group of people, even worse, right? Lindsay's probably like, yep, and I can nod to this, with their clipboards, making notes on you and then walking out. And then you're like, what did they just think? Right? And so that's not helpful in the moment. And now we have to have a meeting to talk about what you just thought. So then my time as an administrator is out the window. You're taking time from a teacher. And so there's just so much benefit to the culture that it creates when, hey, I'm a knowledgeable leader and I know enough to support you in this work. And I'm committed to not just evaluating you, because that's a small part of my job. The big part of my job is supporting you so that you're successful and our kids are successful. And we can to that. So real-time coaching, to me, you ask, like, what does it take? I think real-time coaching. But what does real-time coaching take? Leaders that are knowledgeable, and not just leaders that have knowledge, not just leaders that have been knowledge bombed because they've taken a course, but leaders that actually are able to really, that they've acquired this knowledge, right? They've acquired the knowledge. They can articulate the knowledge, and then they can actualize it by translating that knowledge into practice for teachers. That's really, really important. And I use those three words with leaders a lot. Like, okay, how are we helping people acquire knowledge? How are we making sure that they can articulate what we want them to know? And then how are we helping them actualize it? That to me is huge.
Give us good feedback. Give us constructive, kind feedback when you come and observe. I mean, I just think there's so much potential there for coaching. Sometimes, it is more just like evaluating than making it a learning opportunity. And sometimes maybe you just don't get that feedback that we as teachers, I think we want, we appreciate, and we crave. And then I would just say to teachers who don't have that, you don't have coaches or you don't have anyone to give feedback to you, to come and observe. I have found it's really eye-opening to record yourself. Yep. Set up a camera and record a lesson. I've gone back to watch some before and like, gosh, I thought I explained that so clearly, but nope. And then, oh my gosh, I had no idea those students were doing that, or whatever. And it really helps you improve your craft.
Or what you really said, Lindsay, is I had no idea my kids were so engaged and so well behaved, and now I've got it on video, right? No, but I agree with you. Y'all, these 5 and 10 minute walkthroughs that you're doing once a month in classrooms, you're not seeing the big picture. And so we sit in rooms and watch 30-minute lessons together, and wow, like the things that it reveals, it's almost heartbreaking sometimes. But you know what else it does is it lets teachers who are shining all the time, it lets administrators and school district leaders see every bit of their shine. And it's the most amazing thing to be like, that teacher, look what she did for the entire 30 minutes, right? And then it gives us some evidence and some way to say, hey, we need to show this to other teachers. So then it's shareable, right? Like that really helps us move practices to scale when we can show you what it looks like. And so I think when you start doing that, it creates a level of vulnerability, right? Like, oh, my district is asking me to like turn in a video of me, but we have to have the culture of support. Yeah, we're actually doing this not to evaluate you, but to support leadership and knowing what to look for and how to support you.
Yeah.
Like that's the piece, right? I think too often we have leadership who can sometimes lack the knowledge to offer really constructive feedback. Lindsay, you just named it, right? Like, give me something really juicy to chew on and something that's going to be impactful.
Yeah.
Don't tell me 9 out of 18 of my kids were doing the work.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, help me figure out how to get the other 9 to do the work and to see success. And I'm working with the district, and I love this. We had a big conversation around moving from being evaluative to supportive, because that culture shift is critical to making this work. And that's really important to really getting an entire staff to move with you in one direction. Yes, we have to evaluate. We know the state demands us to evaluate teachers, blah, 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 right? We've all been evaluated for years. We've all survived it, okay? But what would happen if we were supported in an intense way? That's when we're going to see the difference. And so they've created these little Post-it notes in classrooms, and there's 3 words on the bottom. One is sustain. Wow, you're doing something we want to sustain and we want to keep on seeing. The next word is spread. Oh my goodness, that thing right there is something that we want to spread throughout our school, our district, and our state, whatever, right? So sustain, spread, and then the last one is solve. Hey, here's something I noticed in your classroom. Let's work together to solve this. That feels so much better than, hey, you got a 1 on this, come see me in my office, right? Like, wait, my administrator and my coach want to help me solve a problem. I'm down to solve a problem any day of the week, right? But what I don't want is negative feedback that no one's going to help me solve. And so I think that's the reality in a lot of schools. Yep. So the people that are on the ground doing the work, our teachers are the people on the ground closest to the work. And what would it look like if they knew that they had a team of people behind them, not to evaluate them, but to support them and naming, hey, here's things we want us to sustain. Here are things that we want to spread. And here are things that we want to solve. That would feel pretty incredible.
Sometimes they feel that evaluative nature of it when leaders come in and say that only 9 of your kids were on task or whatever. But to be honest, maybe those administrators don't know how to help support, right? So I'm hearing so much of what you're saying, Justin, is the culture. We have to make changes there so it's safe to take risks. So it's okay to feel supported and try something new. And part of that is when we're talking about knowledge building, that is not just on the teachers. So leadership needs to be in those situations where teachers are learning and maybe going through letters themselves or something like that. Do you have any advice or examples in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, examples, I'm just thinking of leaders that I know. So Dr. Christina Wagner, like I said earlier, every time I walked into her office had a book stack, and she was just continuously building her own knowledge. We can't lead what we haven't learned. There's way too much to learn in this work, but I would say connect with a community of leaders. I say often in my business, I'm like, people often ask me, like, what do you do? And so I say I consult organizations, I coach educators and leaders, and I connect change makers to community. I'm going to connect this assistant superintendent over here to another assistant superintendent. Why? Because they don't need to take another course together. They need to be able to hop on the phone and talk to each other with common language and a common understanding to solve problems, right? I think there's this kind of this need for this community of how do we connect. And so one of the things that I'm starting, and I'm really excited about this, is I've been working with a group this year, kind of massaging this, but this cohort of leaders called Show Me How to Soar for next year, right? And we're going to probably start late spring, but like, show me how to soar. And like, what does this look like from the leadership perspective at the district level and then at the school level, but then pairing people up in like job-like roles and giving them a community where they can ask questions and where we can be connected in a really regular cadence, because no one should have to solve problems in silos. We know too much. And that's really been the best thing being in all these different schools and these districts is like, y'all, We all have the same problems. I might see things over there that, wow, that's something I want to spread across all of my schools, right? Which is really the power of this cohort is like, I'm seeing it in one place. Everybody needs to know about this, right? Here's a problem over here to solve. How do we solve these? But I think there's really no safe space for leaders to be like, hey, I need help here. And I'm struggling, because the same way teachers are afraid of being evaluated, guess what? Leaders are afraid of being evaluated too. And no one wants it to be said that like, oh, they didn't know blank. So I think we've got to intentionally create safe spaces where leaders don't have to solve problems in silos. And so that's something I'm really passionate about. And I'm looking forward to really creating that cohort in the future, because we have so much we can learn from each other. And not just me sharing information with other people, but I learn from the school leaders I'm with every day. Like, there's amazing work happening in every single school. But we need to be able to tap into it and to really spread and share that so that other people can do this work in a sustainable way that creates impact that's long term.
Yeah, and I can see that you keep saying like it starts at the top. If you had a district leader, superintendent, then you know that you're going to be supportive. They understand all of this and they're in the same spot and they're willing to be vulnerable and supportive. Then it really does help all the building leaders, everybody down to feel that sense of security and really probably motivation, to be honest, right?
Yeah, this work does not live at one level. And I tell people that all the time. I think too often we say, just change the classroom practice. This work does not live at one level. It has to really live on all the levels, from the top down and the bottom up, right? And I think that's really when we have them pressing at both sides, that's when we squeeze out excellent results. And so I'm excited to see really, there's districts that are working really hard. I'm excited to see what's ahead for them.
Yeah, I love this. I love this conversation, and that we've been talking so much about the environment. Honestly, that was a little bit of an unexpected turn. Some of my questions.
Can I clarify one thing?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so I want to clarify. I think you named earlier, like, culture matters.
Yeah.
Culture does matter, but we build a culture through changing instruction. And I think too often we are trying to build culture by having the Coke cart and a bag of chips. This is not doing it. Stop
Jeans
doing that,
Friday.
right? Jeans on Friday. You know what changes a culture? Winning. When we begin to win, and when we see everybody as an important part of winning together, that changes culture. And really, that's what we saw in Marietta, and what I'm seeing in other schools is schools that focus on changing instruction and creating systems that really support teachers and students. You begin to see that, hey, we're winning. And you know what changes? Morale changes when we're winning. It sucks to lose all the time. Do y'all like showing up to work every day and feeling like you're losing? No, nobody does. And so we have to make sure that we're changing the instruction, because that's really what we're in the business of. We're in the business of teaching and learning. So it doesn't make any sense to try to change the culture any other way.
You know, one of my undergrad degrees is in sociology, and you just described how we talk about culture perfectly. It's not something that can be imposed. It's not. And it's those very things. Culture is a little bit organic. It grows out of the very things you're talking about. So that's so great.
And it has to be authentic, right? And I think that's the thing. We try to do all these Band-Aid things because we know that and it really comes from that. Like, we know we're operating in a broken system. And I think people are doing it out of their best heart, because people feel what that feels like to work in a broken system. And so the best way to fix that culture is to fix the system, right? And fix the system of instruction, fix the system of leadership, fix the system of all of those systems have to be fixed.
And really, just an example that I've been thinking of as you've been talking, like, I have questions. When I was a literacy coach, and I've already admitted I was not a good one. I did my best, but
I was not the best one either. But.
Well, thank you for making me feel better. But I was thinking about, you see teachers doing practices. For me, it was round robin. When I saw them doing that, because I know so much, like, I think, oh my gosh, they got to stop doing that. But really, with what you're talking about with the environment, that takes that pressure off of me. And if we're being supportive and even predictive and talking about routines, that teacher is more likely to notice that themselves right? And then lean on the support system to make the change. So I think in a sense, that would make everything a little bit more, I don't know, just stronger to address
Yeah.
and more authentic.
And I think people would feel more comfortable taking risk, right? Like if I felt like this was a supportive environment, because we do need people to live in the zone of risk taking. What we don't need is for you to sit back and clam up. Like it's not the moment when we want to change trajectories.
Yeah. Like I'm going to do 10-minute PA, no letters only, because I can't change. I don't have time. I don't feel safe to do that. Right. I don't feel supported.
But what if we just tried this, and I'm going to come in your classroom tomorrow and work with you to see what this looks like?
Justin, you just demonstrated why you're so good at your job. That's exciting.
Do you know, I don't often, and I was joking with Kristen Wynn not long at a conference, of course, when we were talking. I don't see myself as an expert, and I think it's really important for us to be humble enough. Like what I view myself as is a laborer that is doing this work every day and is learning along the way. And I think that's what we're all doing. And so I think more than anything, I want to be a partner with other people in this work. And that's hopefully what makes me a change maker, and what makes me impactful is that people view me as supportive and a partner, but also one that's always growing. Like my nose is to the ground, trying to figure out what's working, following the research, and making sure that we're really spreading those best practices.
Yeah, which is fantastic. But on the level you're on too, like when I think of an expert, they have a very narrow focus. Like you might be an expert in one thing because you've spent all your time dedicated to that one thing. Literacy is many things. And when we're talking about implementation, that is not necessarily one thing. So you are in that dynamic middle where there are so many, you used the word lever. That's a perfect word. So many levers in that situation, and every setting is unique. And what I'm hearing from you is that you also honor that. You're not going to say, just because it works in this situation, this is how everyone should do it.
That's a really important thing to name, is that when we did the work in Marietta, we actually tried to apply kind of that exact same thing to other projects. And what I will say is that there has not been one project I've worked on across multiple districts that it looked the same. But what I have learned is that when energy and intention and really what you give your energy to is what's going to work, right? Like, so if we're changing the curriculum, like let's focus on that. Or if we're training leaders and teachers, let's focus on that by building knowledge. Like in Marietta, we really started with strong leadership knowledge building, and then followed it with teacher knowledge building. We did not change. This is important to know. We did not change curriculum, I think, until the beginning of the 4th year. And we saw massive results at the end of the 2nd year.
Oh, that's great.
I think that's crazy for people to understand. But that was because the lever was focused on really helping teachers be responsive because they had strong knowledge, right? Like knowledge is important to practice, but knowledge alone will not do the thing, right? Knowledge has to be followed up with practice, because knowledge is what teachers know. Practice is what teachers do. And what really moves the needle is the doing.
It's like the simple view of reading. They're not exclusive, those two things, knowledge and practice, but you can't have the good outcomes you need without both of them.
Not at all.
Yeah.
That was Marietta's story, is that another district I was working with that just saw double-digit gains in New York. They, and this was after the end of 1 year. It was about 20% across the district. They changed curriculum, and we supported the curriculum implementation. So when we supported the curriculum implementation, we saw about a 20% increase across the district. But those are different levers, right?
And different from what we hear. How many of us, every time they adopt a new curriculum, say, this will take 3 to 5 years to see its impact? But I think that's focusing on the actual curriculum, not the levers that you've been talking about with teachers and practices and support.
Yeah. Dr. Stephanie Stoller, I think, said this so clearly the other day. She was like, implementation moves at the speed of leadership. And there is no truer word, whether it's from an AP, a principal, a coach, a teacher. Everyone is a leader in this work, right? The district superintendent, when all that leadership is moving in the same direction together, it increases the speed, which minimizes the amount of time that we're going to need to see change. And so I really do think like that was pretty eye opening. And I love that quote that implementation moves at the speed of leadership.
Yeah. That's really awesome. And I've noticed too, as we've been talking, like Lindsay will say that in her training. She'll say, this is in her book, this is what works for me. You have your own unique situation, but you can still see those through lines that you've been talking about too, Justin. And yeah. I know Lindsay has been great to share. And I think that's another important thing. When you do find something that works, that aligns with what you know, right? And a new way to implement it, or even like a better way to combine the two, then we learn by sharing. So that is great.
Well, I appreciate you having me on and getting to talk implementation with you all. It's always fun to spend time outside of a 10-minute conversation in a hallway at a conference. But
yes. But Justin, I'm joking with you, but not really, because people love Justin. When they see him at a conference down the hallway, their faces light up. And I was joking with Justin at the last conference we were at with this, because I was standing near some teachers who did just that. And one of them said, "That's Justin Browning. I love him." And I turned to them and I'm like, "I know him." Like I was so leveraging his fame to make myself feel important. I'm like, "I know him." It was really
fun. There's no way I would consider myself remotely famous, but I am thankful to be able to have an impact in this work.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
You don't care about fame. You care about the outcomes for kids.
That is
people,
true.
Humans.
Fame brings way too much responsibility. Changing literacy is enough for me. Okay. That's enough.
Some would say it's even more. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Justin. And people who want to know more about what you do can visit your website, Soar for More. Right?
Yeah,
SOR for more.
www.sorformore.com. It sounds like a jingle, right? Soarformore.com. And or can email me at justin@soarformore.com, and I'd be happy to connect.
Awesome. And thanks to all our listeners for joining us. And we hope you'll join us for the next episode of Literacy Talks.
Thanks for joining us today. Literacy Talks comes to you from Reading Horizons, where literacy momentum begins. Visit readinghorizons.com/literacy talks to access episodes and resources to support your journey in the science of reading.